We're here today at the Humic Research Lab talking with Dr. Rich Lamar and Dr. Hiarhi Monda about humic substances. So let's start with you, Hiarhi. What are humic substances?
Okay, humic substances can be defined as the major component. We're talking about 70 to 80% of the terrestrial and aquatic organic matter that have undergone extensive transformations to the point where discrete organic residues cannot be recognized. As the result of these transformations is the combination of simple but at the same time highly diverse organic molecules. As a consequence, of course, we cannot describe a unique chemical structure, and that is the reason why we refer them to as a complex mixtures.
Okay, so we're talking about humic acids and fulvic acids. How do they differ chemically?
Well, humic acids and fulvic acids are two out of the three components of the humic substances. They are operationally defined, which means that their distinction is based on the solubility in alkaline and acidic solutions. The humic acids represent the fraction that is not soluble under acidic pH, whereas the fulvic acids represent the fraction that is soluble in both alkali and acids. Now, along with humin, which is the insoluble fraction not extracted from alkali, they are grouped under the term humic substances. Now, a further distinction for fulvic acids has been adopted by the International Humic Substances Society, and that separate the hydrophobic fraction from the hydrophilic fraction, with the former that can be absorbed onto a hydrophobic non-ionic resin in order to remove the impurities that are instead collected into the hydrophilic fraction. Now, in relation to the chemistry of humic substances, we can generally say that fulvic acids contain smaller molecules in terms of molecular weight, as they have less carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur, but at the same time they also have a higher oxygen content when compared to humic acids. As a matter of fact, fulvic molecules contain a higher content of carboxyl functional groups, as well as a higher content of phenolic and alcoholic hydroxyl functional groups, which ensure the dispersion and the solubility of the fulvic molecules into solution when the pH is dropped down, because of the polarity that this functional group conferred to the fulvic molecules, giving them the ability to attract the water easily. On the other hand, while fulvic acid molecules contains carbonyl functions that belongs to ketones and aldehydes, the humic instead share more quinone type of carbonyl groups, and share also a larger content of condensed aromatic structures, which have the tendency to stack and coordinate each others by forming these apparently high molecular weight molecules that are called supramolecular structures that coagulate and precipitate when protonated under acidic condition.
So as complicated as that sounds, these are really natural substances that are being continuously formed in soil. So if we think about a forest floor that's undisturbed, how are these humic and fulvic acids being formed in the soil?
Dead plants and animal remains, they continuously accumulate into soil and sediments, whereas the action of soil fauna like earthworms and soil microorganisms that breaks down the organic molecules into their simple and smaller constituents. Now, this natural decay resulting from decomposition processes, along with the synthesis of new products of microbial metabolism, leads to the formation of a brown to black amorphous mass that is called humus, in that process that has been named humification. Now, as the time passes, the humus is buried under the new organic matter that is replenished on the surface, where the oxygen is available for the respiration of microorganisms, and the process and the degradation processes of the humus slow down. At this stage, all the labile components like cellulose and other carbohydrates have been easily degraded, but but some other residues like lignin, being harder to degrade, would require more time and the introduction of other abiotic factors such as high pressure and temperature to be completely transformed. As this material becomes more and more recalcitrant, it stabilizes itself and eventually produces what we actually call the humic substances.
Okay, so Rich, let me go to you here. The substances that we put into our products, we're not digging that out of just regular soil. There are deposits that we are mining commercially. Where are those deposits and how did those form?
Well, let me back up and say humic substances occur in soils, as Hiarhi alluded to, in water bodies like lake, rivers, and streams, in composts, in your backyard compost pile, and in peats, but also in soft coal materials. Through the process of coalification, it goes from peat to brown coals to lignite and subbituminous coals. And it's the latter two, oxidized versions of the latter two, where we obtain our humic substances from to produce our commercial products. Our particular mines are located in southern Idaho, and that happens to be a humic shale. And humic shales form differently than the coal materials. That's where water laden with humic substances is deposited along with clays to produce the shales. And that's in southern Idaho. And then we also have another one in northwestern New Mexico, which is an oxidized subbituminous coal that has a high humic acid content.
Okay, and how did that form in New Mexico? How did those deposits form? What led to that?
So the coal beds formed back in the late Cretaceous period. That was 66 to 100 million years ago. And during that time, the climate was very warm. As a matter of fact, it was tropical conditions in northern Mexico and southern Arizona, up to temperate conditions in Montana at the time. And during that time, there was plate tectonic activity. There were two plates off the west coast of North America, the Farallon plate to the south, which ranged from about San Francisco down to Mexico, and the Kula plate, San Francisco north. And those two plates were being pushed by the Great Pacific Plate, which underlies the Pacific Ocean, under the Great North American Plate, which we're riding on right now. And that formed a mountain range to form on the west coast, and then a depression right in front of that filled in with ocean water to form the Western Interior Seaway. And so the peat beds formed along, the conditions were beneficial or conducive for formation of peat beds along the west coast of that Western Interior Seaway. And over the millions of years, from volcanic activity from the mountain range, that was a result of the subduction of those two plates, the Farallon and Kula plates, and also from sedimentation from the eastern side of the mountains. Those peat beds were buried, and the process of coalification started when the peat beds were pushed down to close to the center of the earth and warmed up, and started the process of coalification.
So just to make that a little more vivid picture, we had a great interior seaway right in the middle of what is now the United States, and it was coming up through the Gulf of Mexico, and it completely covered New Mexico and all the states in that region. But then eventually that receded, and it had marshes and mires along the edges of it with a lot of vegetation, and as that vegetation died, that's where the transformation begins that created the deposits.
Yeah, not exactly correct. At its greatest extent, the Western Interior Seaway ranged on the western side from the middle of Utah, and then on the eastern side all the way to eastern Iowa. And it ranged from, as you said, from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to the Arctic Ocean. But there were several times during the Cretaceous that the sea level rose and fell, which resulted in the shifting of the shoreline. And so it was just on that shoreline and back from the shoreline there was a large coastal plain, particularly from Utah south, that was like 400 kilometers wide, where there were marshes and mires formed there. And then as those plates were further pushed under the Great North American Plate, it shifted the seaway to the east and eventually caused it to drain. And so what we have now.
Okay, so over millions of years, this plant material is decomposed and compressed and buried and oxidized, and we have these deposits that we've located now, and that's where we mine the material from. Once we have the mined material, Hiarhi, how do we extract humic and fulvic acids from that?
Yeah, we use generally a protocol that has been developed by the International Humic Substances Society, which involves the use of a strong base such as potassium hydroxide as extractant under mild condition. Now, the alkaline extract is then separated from the insoluble fraction by centrifugation, and the humic substances solution so obtained are filtered first and then acidified to pH 1, allowing the separation of humic acids that precipitate from the fulvic, which stays into solution. Now, these two fractions then can be separated by centrifugation, and in case of some scientific analysis, that can be purified differently, of course. For example, the humic acids can be purified by washing them with a mixture of hydrochloric and hydrofluoric acids. Whereas for the fulvic acids, that generally contains a lot of salts that needs to be removed, that can be done by using dialysis or reverse osmosis, rod evaporation, as well as column chromatography. Generally, to obtain the most purified material, we use the column chromatography and this hydrophobic resin that we use to isolate hydrophobic and also separate it from the hydrophilic fraction. Then the hydrophobic one is passed through another resin that is a cationic exchange resin that is used to neutralize the solution, the hydrophobic solution. So the fraction so obtained can be freezed as well as freeze-dried later and then used as a powder material for any kind of analysis.
Okay, so we've got millions of years to naturally create these substances. Then we mine them, then we extract them, and we pull out the humic and fulvic acids. So the question is why? Rich, why are these substances good for plants?
Well, humic substances have been found to be a plant biostimulant. And a plant biostimulant is a substance that can cause a mild stress response in plants that primes them to be able to handle stress events that may occur in the future growing season. And stress events always occur: drought, or it's too hot, or maybe it's too wet, or there's insect infestations. So it primes the plant to better handle abiotic and biotic stresses. And the way that works is the stress response. The plant responds by producing more antioxidants in the form of enzymes and also small molecule antioxidants, like vitamin C is the main antioxidant that a plant produces. They also produce more of the proteins that are responsible, that reside in the plant plasma membranes, the cell membranes, that are responsible for the uptake of nutrients and solutes. So there's a total metabolic reprogramming of the plant at the genetic level as a result of the biostimulant activity.
So it's a little bit like why us humans go to the gym, right? We put ourselves under a little bit of stress so that we're better able to handle other things that come along in life, right? So the same thing, humic acids are doing that to plants, putting them under a little bit of stress so that when biotic, meaning like insect or other biological stresses come along, or abiotic like drought or those sorts of stresses come along, the plant is just better equipped to deal with it.
Essentially, I can add something on this. We're studying the plant physiological response in our labs essentially to the application of humic substances, because we want to understand what is driving from the chemistry of the humic substances, what is driving this interaction and the biostimulant effect. So that's the reason why we use and extract different materials, we fractionate them in order to understand which is the right material that is that affect better the plant, and at which stage of the plant life cycle this interaction between the humic and the plant physiological response is maximized.
Which leads right into my last question. In terms of, you guys spend your lives doing research, what are the big questions out there that need to be answered regarding humic substances?
We're focused like a laser on what chemistry that the humic substances possess is driving the biostimulant response. Because if we can identify the chemistries that drive the response, then we can produce products that are more efficient and effective and work more consistently in terms of aiding crop growth.
Okay, Hiarhi, anything to add to that?
Well, we are just trying to operate on the chemistry, as Rich says, because we want to be able to engineer their chemistry in order to improve the biostimulant effect on plants.
Okay. Well, this has been really interesting. This has been our first conversation. I look forward to meeting with you guys again and continuing the conversation in future episodes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.